The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report, and we're coming to you live from Boca Raton, Florida. We are doing a show at the B'nai Torah congregation in Boca Raton. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful edifice, and we have a live audience. And who better to do a talk show with than Ed Koch, especially when we're traveling, unless you want to go to Ukraine, Ed. I don't think that's on your agenda.
No, I like Boca Raton.
All right, so we stay. How are we doing?
We're doing terrific.
So, you got on a plane today, Ed. You were Jewish, correct?
Mm-hmm. Still am.
When you got off the plane, did the pilot do anything for you? Any missionary work?
What Leon's referring to was that bizarre incident on a plane where suddenly the pilot on his radio says to the people on the plane, "How many of you are Christians?" I was not on that plane, but I read about it, and I was offended. Obviously, I was obviously offended, like anybody would be. I mean, it's like, you know, all you can envision is a plane, a Nazi standing up and saying, "Who are the Jews here?" But in any event, they apologized.
Tell me, last week I interviewed Bob Morgenthau, a good friend of yours. You appointed him to the Jewish Museum. In the audience, I guess all of you know whom Bob Morgenthau is. He's a district attorney for about 35 years in Manhattan. His father was Henry Morgenthau Jr., who was very instrumental in saving Jews during World War II. And I asked him straight out, do you think Roosevelt was an anti-Semite?
What did he say?
He belched.
Well, I'll give you my position on that matter, because I've discussed it many times. Roosevelt belongs in that pantheon of presidents in the first circle, you know, Jefferson, Washington, Lincoln. He saved this country during the Depression. He led us through World War II, and he has to be honored for that. But I will never forgive him for his turning his back on the Jews. There were visas that were available that could have been offered to Jews in Germany, elsewhere, to bring them here, and the Roosevelt administration, and he didn't overrule them until Mr. Morgenthau, the Secretary of the Treasury, ultimately came in, and because of their friendship, Roosevelt changed his position. But for that period of time when Jews could leave Germany and elsewhere, Adolf Hitler said, "Take them," because he knew that there were no countries who would take them. And President Roosevelt's administration did not take him. Now, those who want to say wonderful things about the president will say this country was very anti-Semitic in 1939, 1941. And he believed, they say, that if he in any way conveyed that somehow or other he was going to go to war because of the Jews, that he would have been thrown out. That is their position. And it may very well be, because I remember those days in the 30s when there were signs on the Coney Island beaches by Nazis that would say, "No dogs and Jews allowed." That's a fact. That's what it said on the beaches of Coney Island. I both honor him, and also feel very strongly that he is in part responsible for some of the deaths.
You know, David Dinkins told me a similar story. He was a Marine, and that when he was in Washington, as a Marine, he was forced to sit in the back of the bus, and that, he said, was indelibly attached to his memory for the rest of his life.
Well, as we know, the segregation existed in this country by law until the federal laws under President Johnson changed that. And then it still existed de facto, not by law, but by operation of custom. And blacks in this country have gone through an enormous, terrible experience in some parts of the country, but I think very few. They still will go through a humbling, terribly disgusting experience in terms of how they're treated, but I don't think that's true in most of the country today. That doesn't mean there isn't discrimination, but we have come a very, very long way, and people stood up. You know, what I have said to myself on many occasions, and I think everybody has or should, if you were black and had to suffer the indignities that they went through or go through, not to the same extent today, what would you do? And I think I would have been a revolutionary. I mean, I don't think I would have taken it.
You look like one. How many times has Ed been compared to Frank Perdue of Perdue Chickens?
That's true. Fact is, we used him in a skit that the mayor is part of every year with the reporters, and we invited him, the city administration invited him to stay over at Gracie Mansion, and he slept there. The cops were saluting him, not me. Go ahead.
I want the chicken. Ed, you and I have talked many times, but people might be very interested here. What, if you had to give me one seminal event in your life that changed your life, what would it be? Well,
I think World War II changed everybody's life. You go to war, you're a youngster. I was age 19. I came back age 22, 3 years later. That has an enormous impact on your life. But bringing it up to the present, many people who talk about their war experiences will say that will make them never ever willing to go to war. Now that's simply ridiculous. There are just wars, and there are moments in time when you must choose. And getting into the heart of it, there's no question in my mind that the United States and President Bush made absolutely the right decision in going to war against Iraq.
Well, this show has taken a position that in terms of the Middle East and in Israel, the war in Iraq has been very beneficial. The problem in the United States, as you well know better than anybody, and you're a Democrat, is most of your Democratic colleagues seem to really be vehemently against the war. We talk about Dean, we talk about Kerry. Clark does Jackie Mason. On Thursday, I think I was against the war. Friday night, I woke up. Maybe I wasn't against it. Maybe tomorrow it'll change, but let's see how the weather goes. I'm not sure.
Let me give you my understanding of what took us into war. Things that I think are indisputable. Saddam Hussein, after the first Gulf War of 1991, acknowledged that he had weapons of mass destruction, gas and biological weapons. And the United Nations, all the countries represented at the Security Council, said, yes, you do, and you have to give them up, and you have not given them up. And they passed a resolution, it's called 1441, in which they said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, and unless they give them up, it is a cause for war. That's what the resolution, in effect, says. In the UN language, there will be serious consequences is the language you employ to describe you're setting yourself up for war, an act of war. Now, we, the United States, urged other countries to join with us in enforcing the regulation. France and Germany, for two different reasons, decided that they wouldn't. France, because it was owed billions by the Iraqi and didn't want to endanger that. Germany, because the communists and socialists were turning the election into an issue of war or peace, and Schroeder decided he would not be reelected unless he chose peace, as opposed to joining in an invasion of Iraq. And the United States, with Great Britain and some other countries, 17 in all, not with much by way of forces. The forces were primarily U.S. and Britain, went to war. I think it was absolutely justified. Now, when the president spoke to the Congress, he said, we're not going to wait for there to be an imminent reason, imminent danger. He specifically said that there was not an imminent danger. But if we had done in 1936, when I say we, meaning the French and the British, and when the Nazis marched into the Rhineland, if the British and the French had stood up and marched into the Rhineland and kicked them out, there would have been no World War II. Adolf Hitler said that. So you don't wait until it's overwhelming. You take the appropriate action at that time. And I think that the president did the right thing. Let me ask the audience here, how many people here believe that President Bush was right in going into Iraq? Raise your hands. Okay? And how many people are of the belief he was wrong? Raise your hand. Okay. Overwhelmingly, the people here take the position, which I take, that he was absolutely right. Now, with respect to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party currently, I got my start in the Democratic politics by beating Carmine DeSapio. Probably few people here remember his name, but he was the overwhelming organization presence in New York, and I defeated him. And I became a district leader in Greenwich Village, and then I became a city councilman for 2 years, and a congressman for 9 years, and a mayor for 12 years. And during that time, I overwhelmingly supported, elected Democrats in the Assembly, in the State Senate, in the City Council. But occasionally I crossed party lines. I supported John Lindsay. And the Democratic Party tried to throw me out. They put me on trial, but I beat him. I supported Giuliani. I didn't even like him. But I
wrote a book called Giuliani, Bad Man.
I wrote a book on Giuliani, which the title was Giuliani, Nasty Man. Now he was a good mayor in terms of what he did. It was that his personality, he was mean, and but nevertheless, given the choices, I decided, no question in my mind, what I was going to do, and I voted for Bloomberg. So those are three Republicans for mayor.
All right, put on your political hat for a minute.
Yeah.
Is this war going to defeat George Bush?
Well, I don't think so. There are people who are of the belief that they will prevail in the Democratic Party if it becomes the party against the war, which it currently is. I think they're dead wrong. And whether they find weapons of mass destruction or not makes no difference. Saddam Hussein said he had weapons of mass destruction, and in fact he had them in 1991. Now, it was his job, if he wanted to avoid a war, was to show the world where he destroyed them and who destroyed them for him, and establish that he was not a threat. He declined to do that.
Do we have a risk here of Vietnamization? What happened in Vietnam?
Well, I hope not.
We keep losing soldiers all the time.
That is absolutely true. We've lost over 500 soldiers, and it is awful, terrible. But nevertheless, I believe that what we're doing makes absolute sense, and turning it over to the Iraqi army and police officers, which they're going to try to do by July, makes great sense as well.
All right, we're going to cut for a break. This is a commercial venture. We have a lot of advertisers, mainly HSBC, so we'll cut and come right back. Thank you.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Get the book that inspired the award-winning movie, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels.
We're back, and this is the Leon Charney Report. We're talking with Ed Koch.
I am voting for George Bush, and I will tell you why. I don't happen to agree with a single domestic issue that George Bush is supportive of. I opposed his tax reduction bill because it favored the wealthy. That means me, but it was wrong. Just absolutely unfair. I supported voting for the Medicare bill, but it's not a good bill and it has to be amended, but I thought it was important to allow the people to buy their drugs in Canada at 50% lesser price, and that Bush and his administration is wrong. But you can go through all those issues. Not one of them compares with the issue of international terrorism. There is a cultural war going on now. It's a war between fanatics. We're not talking about all Muslims. A majority of Muslims, I'm sure, don't want to engage in terrorism and kill. But there is a significant minority, and it is growing every single day. And what that minority under Osama bin Laden and a whole host of other terrorist leaders, and remember, Saddam Hussein paid terrorists. He paid the families of Palestinians who blew up Jews and who themselves were suicide bombers. He paid their family $25,000 in every case. He was supporting terrorism and other acts of terrorism. I believe that President Bush, when he made this single statement, changed the whole complexion of the world, and in particular the Mideast. He said, "We will go after the terrorists and the countries that harbor them." Now, and he is. And it's changed what's happened there. I mean, Syria appears desirous of having peace in some form with Israel. They're not there yet. Libya volunteers to give up its bomb, its nuclear bomb. Iran suddenly is a little freer than it was vis-a-vis other countries. And what I am saying is that the United States, because of its position, its willingness to take the action that they have taken, has changed the complexion of international terrorism. It's still there. The last demand that bin Laden made, he said, America must convert. Get that?
You didn't on a plane today, though. Stop.
Now,
let me ask you one question.
Go ahead.
I think the most dangerous thing that happened last week was not the missionary on the plane, was the confessions of a Pakistani nuclear scientist, A.P. Khan, his name was, or A.J. Khan, who said, I was selling this nuclear weapons or the materials for nuclear weapons to Libya, to North Korea, to Iran, all over the place. And people probably don't know his name. You think there was a Khan jeweler. People think it's Khan jeweler. This was a desperate man. And on top of that, Musharraf pardoned him.
Well, Musharraf is not long for the world. Musharraf has been subjected to 2 attempts at his assassination. Unfortunately, he lived through them. His bodyguards were shot, killed in some cases. And there will be more, undoubtedly. He does not represent a majority of the Pakistani and their desires. They identify with Osama bin Laden. Thank God he is a supporter of the United States, and apparently, based on all the reports that came out, he believed that if he did not pardon Khan, who was the father of the Muslim nuclear bomb, that the place would erupt and he would be removed. Now, you make a decision, you don't want to be removed, and so he pardoned him. So I don't believe he'll be there very long, and we have to make plans for that.
All right, let's talk about Israel for a minute, and Jews and anti-Semitism. First of all, the International Court of The Hague is bringing a tribunal with respect to the fence. I might point out, I think most of you know that there is no, if they came out with a judgment, it would be meaningless because it has no efficacy to be executed. It would have to go to the Security Council, and there, most assuredly, the United States would veto it. But we're talking about a lot of public relations. We're talking about the World Court looking at Israel as maybe a terrorist nation itself. You know, when I do television on other shows, it's always the same story. I debate Arabs. One is they're always freedom fighters. And when I ask them about UN Resolution 181, which divided Palestine into 2 states, Israel in 1947, they hufka. You know what hufka means?
Yeah. Well,
I don't know what hufka means, but you get the point.
Yeah. Let me give you my view of that. I believe that the poll taken in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip about 2 years ago, which showed that a majority, it was by a small number the majority, I think it was actually 51%, a majority said that while you could enter into, for strategic reasons, a peace with Israel, it would only be for a short period, because what ultimately they wanted and would not be satisfied with less was historic Palestine from the river, that's the quote, from the river to the sea. from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Nevertheless, even though it's highly unlikely that there will be an acceptance of peace, and I believe that should there be a peace agreement, it should be subject to ratification by both the Palestinians on the West Bank and Gaza, and require a two-thirds ratification, and the same with the Jews in Israel, two-thirds ratification, so that it has some meaning amongst the public, and not find that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, people would say, those people who signed that agreement didn't represent us. The people didn't want it. It was simply a few leaders, and then they repudiated. Now, Leon mentioned the fence. It's interesting about that. One of the reasons, the major reason that I believe that my support of Bush is warranted is the Bush Doctrine, which I mentioned earlier, which relates to the security of every nation in the world. We will go after the terrorists and the countries that harbor them. We will not submit. It is a doctrine that is as important as the Monroe Doctrine was in its time, as no foreign power establishing itself in the Western Hemisphere. That was the Monroe Doctrine, or the Truman Doctrine containing communism. The Democrats don't believe in that. They don't have the stomach for it. I'm not telling you that Democrats, the leaders in the party, aren't supportive of Israel, but it's not the same support. I know that the presidents that were most supportive of the state of Israel were, up until Bush, who was number one in that area, up until Bush it was Reagan and then Clinton. There were lots of presidents who, while they helped, I mean Nixon helped by providing, because he thought it was in the best interest of the United States, providing rearmaments for Israel, but he surely didn't like Jews. We all know that from the conversations that he had.
Yeah, you can go back to Harry Truman and find anti-Semitic remarks.
That's true.
I don't think that's pertinent.
I think it's pertinent. I revere Harry Truman the same way I revere Roosevelt. I mean, they did wonderful things. But that doesn't mean you should forget what he said. Absolutely not. But for me, the key here is that Israel exists only because the United States is willing to support it when all those other countries won't. The countries that might like Israel, the best they'll do is not vote. That's Britain and France and the others at the Security Council or at the Assembly, and on the fence. Well, what country doesn't have a fence on its borders? You can argue about where the fence should go, but you can't argue that a country doesn't have a right to put a fence on its borders and keep people out, especially suicide bombers. But the Arabs at the Assembly and their supporters said no, they don't have a right to do that, and they have taken it to an international court, which is only advisory in nature, hoping to get a decision that the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza is illegal and drive Israel out. You say to yourself, we know who started the war in 73. I mean, the Arabs invaded Israel. Thank God Israel beat them. That's a war. Now, until there is a peace, and the Arabs don't dictate the peace, there are negotiations, and surely everybody agrees that Barack was more than generous. He was too generous. And they still wouldn't do it. So on that basis, Israel has to defend itself with a fence and with taking measures to prevent the suicide bombers, whether in Nablus or any of the other cities on the West Bank?
I'll tell you what's disheartening. Sometime in the late 80s, I was asked by an Israeli minister to go visit Yasser Arafat in Tunis. And I went. I wasn't married then, so it wasn't as risky, but the feeling of going to Tunis as a Jewish fellow was something I did not want to do. In any case, I went because they told me it was very important to get a reading on Yasser Arafat to see what type of character he was. And so I went to Tunis on a private plane. I refused to have the pilots leave the plane because I didn't want to stay there. It wasn't a place where I wanted to take a vacation. When I landed in Tunis, they took away my passport and they started talking Arabic, which I'm not that familiar with. Halasala, kalakala, pulakala. And Arafat meets people only at 2, 3 in the morning. So I had to have cholent or hummus with the bodyguards of Arafat, 50 of them, who were guarding him on the street. And when I finally got to meet him, and what I was worried about is not that Arafat was going to shoot me, because he always walks around with this brazen gun in his holster here, you know, like he's macho, Rambo. But I was afraid the bodyguards might not like a Jewish guy coming over there. And this was a non-publicity trip. There was a time, at the same time, Rita Hauser, if you remember the name, made a big deal out of it in Scandinavia. Well, anyway, I was a backdoor channel. I went to see him. And I told this to the rabbi. I said, the first thing I said to Arafat was, why don't you take the schmuck off your head and wear a Hamburg? Be a peace man. And we talked for 3 or 4 hours, and I flew back to Geneva where Weitzman was waiting for me, and he collapsed because he said, look, I never sent somebody into combat that I myself don't want to go. But had he gone, then the Israeli government would have thrown him out. And he did get into trouble with Shamir on it. But what I did is I tested Arafat. I asked him to try and save 3 MIAs, Israeli missing in action fellows, and he should come back to me in 2 weeks. And they said, yes, yes, I come, I come. So I went back, I reported to Shimon Peres, who said, keep talking to him. Chaim Berlev, who I think was one of the great heroes of Israel, I could talk to you for hours about him. Ezer Weitzman, who wanted me to keep going forward with it. And Robin, who was against it totally. And he was a very close friend of mine, Robin. Robin, I had checked with Robin before I went. He said, you're an American, you go. In any case, what we found out is that Arafat was a liar in 1998. He still has not changed his stripes. He never came back to us with those things that he promised. I went down to the Gaza to see him again. And HSBC people would love this. He wanted to do a bond issue. And we were trying to get a spread on the interest rates, and he thought a spread was mayonnaise. So he was rather confused. But the object of this story is to tell you that he never came through with any commitment. And this is what troubles me. So maybe, and I'll ask your opinion, Ed, maybe a unilateral withdrawal by the Israeli government is a good deal. But don't answer that. We've got a break so you can think about it. We'll be right back after a break.
Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening, a book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish.
We're back. I'm Leon Charney. We're talking to you live from Boca Raton, Florida, B'nai Torah congregation. Beautiful crowd, beautiful people. And we're talking about, obviously, politics and everything else that's on Ed Koch's mind, because he's a brilliant commentator and he knows. How are we doing, Ed?
Well, we're doing well tonight. But the most important thing that I want to reiterate is that the security of the United States, number one for everybody in this room and in this country, but that does not mean that you are required to turn your backs on the people from whence you spring. This great country of ours, whether you're of French descent or Italian descent or Hungarian, you know, every nation in the world, you have a right to associate with the people of the countries from which your people came, or from which you personally came. That's the difference between America and every other country. We want you to maintain those ties. And Jews are no different than anybody else. And so you have an absolute right to think of what is the impact on Israel. That's not dual loyalty. It's the kind of loyalty that every American has vis-a-vis the land of his parents, his grandparents, and so forth. That's American. Now, I am telling you that the actions of George Bush, totally different than the actions of, in my judgment, Democratic presidents. Bill Clinton, who was very good on the state of Israel, nevertheless didn't veto resolutions which were unfair and directed at Israel in a hostile way. Jimmy Carter did not. I am saying that there has never been a president like George Bush on this issue. Now, some people will say, in fact, it's when I spoke to a group of Hadassah women in California, one of them got up and said, you know, Mayor, I don't like the fact that we're supported, and Israel is supported by 70 million fundamentalists in this country. I said, well, why not? What don't you like about that? She's talking about Christian fundamentalists. And I said, why not? She said, well, what the reason that they support Israel is that they believe that the Messiah cannot come to the earth unless the Jews, the Israeli, are in all of historic Israel and Judea, and that when he does come, that they will call on the Jews to convert, and if they don't convert, the Jews will die. That was what she said, and I don't like that. So I said, listen, there are 1,200,000,000 Muslims in the world. There are only 13 million Jews in the world. We need allies. Now, you don't like the 70 million fundamentalists. Let me tell you how you should respond. If, in fact, as a result of what they're doing, the Messiah returns or comes to the earth, there are two questions that he must be asked. The first question is, are you Jewish? And then the second question is this your first visit or your second visit? Now, if the Messiah says it's his first visit, then we were right. If he says it's his second visit, then maybe we should convert.
Let me finish davening first. I do a great marathon. The real question, Ed, that permeates the community, the Jewish community throughout the United States, especially the conservative movement, is what is the role of the conservative movement in Israel? A, this is not the second Messiah, it's the first. And the second one is, in your opinion, do American Jews have a right to give ideas or supplement or interfere in any way with the policies of the Israeli government?
Well, of course they can disagree. Interfere, I don't know what that means. I mean, if you want to vote in Israel, go there. I'm an American. I'm never going there to live. But I believe it's my duty to make sure that Israel exists and is strong so that those Jewish communities around the world that are in danger know that they have a place of sanctuary. And that is why I take the position that I do. Now, I believe, and this will, I don't even know whether this place is conservative or Orthodox. What is it?
They don't know yet themselves. They're checking.
But in any event, I believe that what the Orthodox are doing in Israel is shameful in depriving Jews who are conservative, who are Reform, from having rabbis with the same rights and duties and obligations that Orthodox Jews have. It's just dead wrong. And I believe imposing their rules on other people who are Jewish, secular Jews. I'm a secular Jew. I mean, I believe in God. I believe that I have to be in the temple at least twice a year, otherwise I will really be punished.
Everything we use
right?
twos.
But I'm a secular Jew, and I don't want to be told what I must do. You can tell me what you think I should do. So that's where we are.
All right, if I say Arik Sharon to you, what do you say?
Well, a long life, I say about Arik Sharon. I know him. I think I know him well. I was actually at his home in the desert.
It's a ranch.
Yeah, it's a ranch.
It's a big ranch.
Right, and it was just he and his wife, who's now dead, Lily, and myself. We're having breakfast, and I said to him, Arik, I love you, and I don't want you to die, and you're too fat.
He just had his kidney stones
You must go on a diet. He says to me, I hardly eat. That's what all fat people say.
Wait, you know that he had his kidney stones crushed?
I didn't know that.
And there was an earthquake in Israel today. And many people thought it was Sharon leaving the hospital.
Let me also say this. I believe in a two-state solution. I believe that the Muslims, the Palestinians, should have their own state, and the lines have to be drawn through negotiation. I believe that heart and soul. And I believe that the Jews want to do it. I don't believe that a comparable percentage in terms of numbers of the Palestinians have that same desire. They really want the entire area.
Well, Iran's policy stated is the destruction of Israel, period. Now, if you align them with Syria, whom they fund all the time, that the only answer is that they would love to see Israel totally destroyed. And I'm not sure Jews don't go along with that. They may give you this poppycock that...
what Jews go along with wanting to be destroyed?
Iran may say, well, we don't mind Jews, but we don't want to see a Zionist state. That's the differentiation.
A Zionist state, I'll tell you what Zionism, to me, modern Zionism means. Support of the Jewish nation. That's all it means. It means a lot. I told you earlier, I'm not going there to live. I'm a first-class American citizen. This country has given me so much, allowed me to be the mayor. I mean, it's incredible what this country has done for all of its minorities, because there is no real majority in the United States. But we have a right, just like the French and the Italians and the Hungarians and the Czechs, to have a Jewish nation. And it's there, and thank God.
I'll come to an easier topic, and you are a very, very, very close friend of Cardinal O'Connor.
Yes.
Are you a friend of Mel Gibson?
Well, you know, I don't know Mel Gibson. I know I had a very special relationship with John Cardinal O'Connor. We wrote a book together. We didn't agree on a whole host of things, but we respected one another, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man who loved the relationships between Catholics and Jews. I mean, he thought that was extremely important, and he sought to strengthen them, which is what I try to do. I mean, I believe it's extremely important that Jews and Catholics work together and support one another. Now, Mel Gibson is a Catholic
Haredi.
Meaning very, very Orthodox, not accepting Vatican II. Now, Vatican II, very briefly, under John 23, said the killing of Jesus, which did involve Jews. I mean, Jesus was a Jew. The 12 apostles were Jews. They lived in a Jewish land. Jesus died a Jew. So the involvement of Jesus at that time with the Romans and the Jews was a political one, and there were, without question, Jews who thought he was challenging the political government at the time, and they wanted him dead. Not the nation, but individuals. Now, what Vatican II said was, whatever they did is not the sin of the descendants of the Jews, you out there, me. And it was a tremendous change. It ended the charge of deicide, the killing of God, which has caused pogroms for hundreds, if not several thousand years, and thousands of Jews have died as a result of the charge of deicide. That was lifted. Now, the question is whether Mel Gibson's movie will seek to once again create the charge of deicide. I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. I'm a movie critic. I will see the movie, and I will review it.
I'd like to be there when you review it.
It'll be public.
We'll do a show on the passion of Mel Gibson. Well, we're going to come for another break. We'll be into our last segment, and then we will take questions. So just hold on, and we'll be right back.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com.
We're back. I'm Leon Charney, and we are telling you live at the B'nai Torah Synagogue in beautiful Boca Raton, Florida, with Ed Koch. And as is usual, this is an organic show. We never prepare our questions, and Ed and I certainly don't have to prepare any questions. You know, Dean, you remember this fellow who was running for president? Did he take Prozac? Or did he forget it? I'm going to tell you a story.
Good. Yeah.
The last time I was in a shul addressing a crowd was in Russia, in the Soviet Union. And I was there on Rosh Hashanah, and I sat next to a man, and he said in Yiddish to me, "Da hast a %," which in Yiddish means, "Do you have a few cents?" And I said, "No, it only have dollars." So he says to me, "Okay, I won't be disappointed. I'll take the dollars." This reminds me of Dean, and so I want your comments about Dean.
Sure. He was a phenomenon in the sense that he revealed what party primaries are in the Democratic primary. The people who come out in largest numbers are the radicals on the left. Same is true, radicals on the right, with respect to the Republicans. And what he was appealing to, Dean, were those radicals on the left. You may even remember he said with respect to the United States position on Israel is that we have to be even-handed, meaning 50% here and 50% there. I mean, that was the thrust of it. And then when the United States has an alliance with Israel. The Arabs want the United States involved because they believe there is no other way that they will ever be able to come to a negotiated peace, because Israel will seek to oblige the United States. And they know that there is this alliance. It's historical. Dean didn't know that. Think about it.
Well,
he didn't know that. Or if he knew it, he wanted to change it. Or if he didn't really want to change it, he wanted to convey to the ultras who were going to vote in a primary that he was going to want to change it. Because the radical left is Israel's greatest enemy. The radical ultra-left is Israel's greatest enemy.
Let me tell you another very interesting fact, that when Joe Lieberman was running for president, and he was polling Jewish voters, most of the Jewish voters were not going for Joe Lieberman. In fact, I got a call from Joe Lieberman the day after Gore did his dance. I don't know where Gore is. No one can find Gore today. He's doing these great speeches, but he misplayed himself totally. But when Joe called me on the phone, he said, "Leon, the Jewish vote is not with me. They're not taking me." And I think I once discussed this with the rabbi, because the Jews in their history always had what was called shtatlan, which was the emissary to the community, from the community to the leader. And Jewish people, for some reason, and this is a good audience to test it with, have always been a little fearsome of a Jew getting into a high position. Now you, Ed, you didn't want to become, or you ran for governor of New York, but you told me the food stinks in Albany. So
That's true.
So you didn't care.
It's more important than that. I don't think you should vote for someone simply because he's a Jew or she's a Jew and I'm a Jew. Joe Lieberman came to see me when he was going to decide whether or not to run, and he said, "Well, what is it that you would advise me?" I said, "Don't run. You will lose." I said to him when he's in my office, "I'm voting for Bush." And I love you, Joe, and I do. So he said, "You're the only one who's told me not to run, who didn't say it was because a Jew can't win." I said, "No, it has nothing to do with it. We got 3 Jews running, Kerry, Lieberman, and there's a third, and Clark. So
Clark's not sure. Maybe
whatever it is.
I think maybe he did.
It's not it, I said. It's not it. You belong in the Senate. You're the conscience of the Senate. Now, let me ask you this. How many people here, if the vote were today or tomorrow, would vote for Bush? Raise your hand. How many people will not vote for Bush? Raise your hand. Okay. I would say a majority said that they would not. Now, you should know that the highest number of Jews voting percentage-wise for a Republican was for Reagan, and it was 40%. What I'm telling you, and I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart, if a larger percentage doesn't vote for Bush, who are Jewish, it would be an ungrateful act. An ungrateful act. Listen, that's my position. That is my position. And I think that I'm familiar with the issues. I'm familiar with the issues.
This is a very, very dramatic move for the Leon Charney report. We're going to send the tape to George Bush. I expect that I'll be named ambassador to France. And at that point, you and I are going to do will you come to France?
I'll come, sure. Yeah.
You know, I did the O'Reilly show, which is a very big show on Fox News. He was a pretty temperamental guy, and he talked to me about France. And I bashed France. I mean, I don't know if France is still alive after I bashed them. First time I saw smiles out of O'Reilly. And what we have to worry about in France is that the Muslim population there is 7%, and they grow much quicker than the Jews. But how many people here would vote for Ed Koch for president? Draft Ed Koch.
Sure.
I think it's a very serious problem as to how far a Jewish personality. You went very far. You went for 3 terms. Ed.
There are only three-term mayors of New York City: LaGuardia, Wagner, and myself. And there'll never be another, because we now have term limits so that nobody can serve more than 8 years.
And wherever you walk with Ed Koch, he's really beloved. That's why we have a crowd here for him tonight. But I think what's important is how far can one, you know, when I worked in the Senate for Senator Hartke trying to bring Jews out of Russia, there were 2 Jewish senators. One was named Ribakov and the other was named Javits. And that's all you saw, and maybe you had 2 congressmen or 3 congressmen. When you were there weren't that many Jews.
Well, there are currently, I believe, 11 senators who are Jewish, and probably somewhere around 25, 26 members of the House. And
the question really is, I don't think it'll be answered tonight, but we'll do many shows on it, is the United States ready for a Jewish president? And I don't know if we know the answer today. Lieberman certainly was one who had a pretty fair chance.
Listen, anti-Semitism in the world is at a crescendo, with the sole exception of the United States. That doesn't mean there isn't any anti-Semitism in the United States. There is, but vastly different and far more under control. This is an extraordinary country. We ought to get down every night and kiss the ground here.
Well, we have a chapel here, and I do Maariv a lot, so we can pray. The show is coming to a close. I think we know where Ed Koch is going in the presidential election. Tell us a little bit about the mayoralty. Bloomberg in again?
Well, I'm a supporter of Mike Bloomberg. He's been a really first-rate mayor in terms of making every decision on the merits. But at this moment, he's the underdog. But I'll be out there. I told him I'll be his advance man.
Ed, as usual, running out of time. We never have enough time with you. We thank everybody here in the audience. We will see you next week with another guest incomparable to Ed Koch.